Part 6, the days on Vela Prime continued to unfold, each one bringing Daniel Harper closer to understanding why he had been chosen. Though the debates between Lyra and Kale remained unresolved, Daniel began to see glimpses of change among the Valans. Some were starting to warm up to him, their forms shifting in ways that suggested curiosity rather than hostility. Others still regarded him with skepticism, but even they couldn't deny the spark of interest his presence had ignited. One evening, after a long day of exploring the city and learning about Valan culture, Daniel found himself wandering alone through the glowing corridors of Lyra's ship. The vessel was quiet, its hum soothing, as it drifted silently above the planet's surface. He hadn't intended to snoop, but when he passed a chamber filled with shimmering holograms, something caught his eye. The images flickered faintly, drawing him closer. Inside the chamber, rows of holographic records floated in midair, each one labeled with symbols Daniel couldn't read. As he stepped inside, the room seemed to respond to his presence, the holograms rearranging themselves into patterns he could understand. One particular record stood out, a swirling image of Earth, surrounded by ancient Valan ships. Intrigued, Daniel reached out and touched it. The moment his fingers brushed the hologram, the chamber came alive. Images flooded the space, showing scenes from centuries ago. A group of Valan explorers stood stranded on a medieval Earth. There, sleek suits blending awkwardly with the rough terrain. They were injured, their adaptive bodies struggling to cope with the planet's harsh environment. Around them, humans gathered, farmers, villagers, even children, offering food, shelter, and care. Daniel watched in awe as the humans tended to the wounded Valans, their actions driven by kindness rather than fear. Despite not understanding the aliens' language or origins, the humans treated them with compassion, nursing them back to health over weeks. Eventually, the Valans repaired their damaged ships and departed, leaving behind only gratitude etched into their records. As the final image faded, Daniel stood frozen, his mind racing. So this was the truth behind Lyra's choice. Centuries ago, humanity had shown the Valans unexpected kindness, proving that even primitive beings could possess qualities worth admiring. And now, Lyra believed Daniel carried traces of that same altruism within him. Before he could process everything, the chamber's door slid open, and Lyra appeared. Her luminous eyes widened slightly at the sight of him, but she didn't seem surprised. "You weren't meant to discover this yet," she said softly, stepping inside. "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "This changes everything." Lyra hesitated, her shimmering form reflecting the glow of the holograms. "I wanted you to understand our reasons in your own time," she admitted. "The past is important, but it does not define us entirely. What matters most is how we move forward." Daniel shook his head, still grappling with the revelation? "So all of this bringing me here, defending me against Kalitz because of what happened centuries ago?" "In part," Lyra replied, "but it is also because of who you are. Embody the spirit of those who help my people. Your curiosity, your resilience, your willingness to trust despite uncertainty reminds us of what we once received from humanity." Her words struck a chord within Daniel. He thought about his life back in Montana, the quiet moments of connection, the simple acts of kindness he'd taken for granted. Helping a neighbor fix a fence, sharing meals with friends, lending an ear to someone in need. These were small gestures, but perhaps they held more meaning than he realized. "I don't know if I'm worthy of all this," Daniel admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just me." "Is exactly why you are worthy," Lyra said firmly. "You do not seek recognition or reward. You act from the heart without expectation. That is rare, Daniel, even among my people." Her reassurance brought a lump to his throat. For so long, he had doubted himself, believing he was nothing special. But now, standing amidst the glowing records of Valan history, he began to see himself differently. Maybe he wasn't extraordinary in the way the Valans measured greatness, but he carried something equally valuable: humanity. The next morning, Daniel accompanied Lyra to a gathering in the city square. It was a public forum where Valans shared ideas and debated decisions affecting their society. Today's topic was Daniel himself, or rather, Implications of his presence on Vela Prime. The crowd was larger than usual, buzzing with anticipation. As Lyra took the stage, "We have much to discuss," she began, her voice steady and commanding. "Kale has raised valid concerns about the risks of associating with humans, but let us not forget the rewards. Centuries ago, humanity showed us compassion when we needed it most. They gave us hope, strength, and a renewed sense of purpose. Is it not fitting that we repay that kindness now?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some nodding in agreement while others exchanged skeptical glances. Kale, standing near the front, crossed his arms, his form rigid with disapproval. "Repayment is not enough," he countered. "What guarantee do we have that this human will not disrupt our unity? His arrival has already caused division." Lyra turned to face him, her expression unwavering. "Division exists because we are growing," she said. "Change challenges us, forces us to question what we believe. It is not a weakness, it is a strength. Daniel represents an opportunity to learn, to evolve. Will we turn away from that, or will we embrace it?" Before Kale could respond, Daniel stepped forward, surprising everyone, including himself. He had never spoken publicly before, especially not in front of such a large audience. But something inside him stirred, urging him to try. "I know, I'm not perfect," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm not smart like you, or strong, or advanced. I'm just a guy from a small town who fixes things for a living. But maybe that's the point. Maybe being different isn't a bad thing. Back on Earth, we say that everyone has something to offer, if you're willing to listen." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I don't know what the future holds for me or for your people, but I do know this. Kindness matters. Compassion matters. Connection matters. If I can help bridge the gap between Asav and a little bit, then maybe I'm here for a reason after all." The crowd fell silent, their forms shifting subtly as they absorbed his words. Some looked thoughtful, while others seemed moved. Even Kale's expression softened slightly, though he remained reserved. When Daniel finished speaking, Lyra placed a hand lightly on his shoulder, pride evident in her glowing eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, though the tension didn't vanish. Entirely, the atmosphere shifted. For the first time, Daniel felt a glimmer of acceptance, not just from Lyra, but from the Valens around him. They may not fully understand him yet, but they were beginning to see the value he brought. Later that evening, as Daniel sat on the edge of the floating garden overlooking the city, he reflected on everything that had happened. The journey ahead was still uncertain, fraught with challenges he couldn't predict. But for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that he belonged not because he was extraordinary, but because he was human. And perhaps in some small way, that was enough. Part 5, the days on Vela Prime began to blend together for Daniel Harper, each one filled with new experiences and challenges. Though he had passed the initial tests in the learning halls, his journey was far from over. Lyra explained that understanding wasn't a destination, it was a process. The Valens didn't just want to test him, they wanted to learn from him, to see how his mind worked and what made him unique. For Daniel, this meant more trials. Though none were as straightforward as solving puzzles or creating art, one morning, Lyra led Daniel to a secluded chamber deep within the learning halls. Unlike the other rooms he'd seen, this one was stark and empty, its walls smooth and featureless. A single platform stood in the center, glowing faintly. "What is this place?" Daniel asked, glancing around nervously. "This is the Chamber of Reflection," Lyra replied. Her voice was calm, but carried an undertone of seriousness. "Here you will face your inner self." Daniel frowned. "My inner self. What does that mean?" Lyra stepped closer, her shimmering form catching the light. "It means confronting your fears, your doubts, and your deepest desires. You will be shown memories, moments from your past, and asked to interpret them. This test measures honesty above all else. Honesty." The words sent a shiver down Daniel's spine. He wasn't sure he wanted to relive old memories, especially not in front of an audience of alien beings. But before he could protest, Lyra gestured for him to step onto the platform. Reluctantly, he obeyed, As soon as his feet touched the surface, the room shifted. The walls dissolved into darkness, leaving only the platform illuminated. Then images began to appear around him, holograms so vivid they felt real. They showed moments from his childhood, playing in the fields near Willow Creek, helping his father fix fences, arguing with his mother over chores. Each memory played out in detail, forcing Daniel to relive emotions he thought he'd long buried. At first, the scenes were harmless enough, evoking nostalgia rather than discomfort. But then the images turned darker. He saw himself as a teenager, sitting alone in his bedroom after failing a math test. He heard his parents' voices raised in anger during late-night arguments. He even glimpsed a moment from his early 20s, when he had walked away from a fight with a close friend, too proud to apologize. "Why are you showing me this?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling. He felt exposed, like the walls of the chamber had peeled back his soul for everyone to see. "These memories define you," Lyra said softly. "They shape who you are. To understand yourself is to grow stronger." Daniel clenched his fists, trying to steady his breathing. It wasn't easy facing these fragments of his past, especially when some of them brought shame or regret. But as the images continued to play, he realized something important. They weren't just reminders of pain. They were also markers of resilience. Every failure, every argument, every mistake had taught him something valuable. Without those struggles, he wouldn't be standing here now. When the final memory faded, the room returned to its original state. Daniel stood motionless, his heart pounding. He felt raw, vulnerable, but also strangely lighter, as if shedding old burdens he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "Well done," Lyra said, stepping forward. Her expression was gentle, approving. "You faced your truths without flinching."
I
"Didn't have much choice," Daniel muttered, managing a weak smile, "but I think I get it now. Facing yourself isn't about being perfect. It's about learning." Lyra nodded. "Exactly. And that is why we value honesty so highly." Later that day, Daniel found himself in another part of the city, a vast library filled with floating archives of knowledge. Unlike Earth libraries, which housed books and documents, this one contained holographic records accessible through touch-sensitive panels. Sira, the young Valen he'd met earlier, greeted him warmly. "Lyra told me you might enjoy exploring our history," she said, her form shifting slightly as she spoke. "There is much to learn here," Daniel hesitated. "Not sure I'll understand any of it," he admitted. "Your people are so advanced. Everything feels overwhelming." Sira tilted her head, her luminous eyes studying him. "Understanding comes in many forms," she said. "Sometimes it is enough to simply observe." Encouraged by her words, Daniel approached one of the panels. When he touched it, a hologram sprang to life, depicting scenes from Valen history. He watched as their ancestors built the first energy fields, developed adaptive bodies, and ventured into space. The images were mesmerizing, offering glimpses into a civilization shaped by curiosity and innovation. As he moved from panel to panel, Daniel noticed recurring themes: exploration, adaptation, and connection. The Valens valued relationships not just with each other, but with the universe itself. They believed every species, no matter how different, had something to teach them. "This is amazing," Daniel said, turning to Sira. "Your people have accomplished so much. How do you keep moving forward without losing sight of who you are?" Sira smiled faintly. "By remembering where we came from," she replied. "Our past guides us, even as we reach for the stars." Her answer stayed with Daniel long after he left the library. It reminded him of home, the way the rolling hills of Montana grounded him, no matter how far he traveled. Maybe that was why Lyra had chosen him. It's not because he was extraordinary, but because he represented balance. Someone who appreciated simplicity while striving for growth. Despite the progress Daniel made, tensions among the Valens continued to simmer. Kale remained a vocal critic of Lyra's decision, rallying others to his cause. One evening, during a public assembly in the city square, Kale addressed the crowd once again. "We cannot ignore the risks posed by this human's presence," he declared, his voice echoing across the gathering. "He brings chaos, uncertainty. Our society thrives on order, on unity. How can we maintain that with such a disruptive force among us?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some nodding in agreement while others exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel stood at the edge of the square, feeling the weight of Cale's words pressing down on him. He wanted to defend himself, to argue that he wasn't a threat, but what could he say? Cale was right in a way. Daniel didn't belong here. His very existence challenged everything the Valens believed. Before he could react, Lyra stepped forward, her form glowing brightly against the twilight sky. Cale speaks of risk, she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. But he forgets that risk is essential to growth. Daniel is different. That is precisely why he matters. Cale's form stiffened, his eyes narrowing. And what of tradition? Will you cast aside centuries of wisdom for the sake of one? Human. I honor our traditions, Lyra countered. But I also honor the spirit behind them, the drive to explore, to learn, to evolve. Daniel embodies that spirit. To reject him is to reject ourselves. The crowd erupted into debate, voices rising as opinions clashed. Some sided with Cale, clinging to the safety of familiarity. Others supported Lyra, eager to embrace change. Daniel watched silently, overwhelmed by the intensity of it all. He felt like a pawn in a game he barely understood, caught between opposing forces. After the assembly ended, Lyra sought Daniel out. She found him sitting alone on a bench, overlooking the glowing cityscape. "Are you all right?" she asked, her tone soft. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, rubbing his temples. "I feel like I'm causing trouble for everyone. Maybe Cale's right, I don't belong here." Lyra sat beside him, her presence calming. "Consume you," she said. "Cale's fears are valid, but so are mine. Change is never easy, but it is necessary. You remind us of that?" Daniel sighed, staring out at the shimmering horizon. "I just wish I knew why you chose me. Why me? Out of everyone on Earth?" Lyra placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Because you carry something rare within you," she said. "Something my people have forgotten. Compassion, curiosity, resilience. These qualities may seem small, but they are powerful. They connect us to each other, to the universe." Her words lingered in Daniel's mind as night fell over Vela Prime. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, bathing the city in a soft lavender glow. For the first time since arriving, Daniel allowed himself to believe that maybe he did belong here, not because he was extraordinary, but because he was human, and perhaps in some small way, that was enough. Part for the days that followed Daniel Harper's arrival on Vela Prime passed in a blur of wonder and discovery. Each morning, he woke up in the same hovering bed-like structure inside Lyra's sleek spacecraft, which now served as his temporary home. Though it was nothing like the cozy cabin back in Montana, Daniel found it oddly comforting. The ship adjusted to his needs, dimming the lights when he slept and warming the air to match Earth's climate. It was almost as if the vessel itself were alive, watching over him. Lyra spent much of her time guiding Daniel through the city, introducing him to its wonders and helping him understand the Valen way of life. She explained how their society operated, how they valued knowledge above all else, striving to learn from every species they encountered. They had no leaders in the traditional sense. Instead, decisions were made collectively, with each Valen contributing their unique perspective. It was a system built on trust and cooperation, qualities Daniel admired but struggled to fully grasp. One morning, Lyra took him to a floating garden, suspended high above the city. The garden was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Plants of all shapes and sizes grew in midair, their roots dangling freely as if defying gravity. Some flowers glowed softly, casting a warm light over the area, while others emitted sweet, intoxicating scents that filled the air. Streams of water flowed upward, forming shimmering arcs before cascading back down into pools below. "This is beautiful," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. He reached out to touch one of the glowing flowers, marveling at how soft its petals felt against his fingertips. "How does it stay up here?" "The plants are sustained by energy fields," Lyra explained. "They draw nourishment from the air and light around them. We design these gardens to remind us of our connection to nature, even as we explore the stars." Daniel nodded, though he didn't fully understand. He turned to look at Lyra, noticing the way her skin seemed to shimmer more brightly in the garden's glow. "Do you miss Earth?" he asked suddenly. "I mean, you've been traveling for so long. Don't you ever want to go back to your home world and just stay?" Lyra tilted her head slightly, considering the question. "We do not think of Vela Prime as merely a place," she replied after a moment. "It is an idea symbol of who we are. Our journey is endless because there is always more to learn, more to discover. But yes, sometimes I long for stillness." Words struck a chord within Daniel. He thought about his own life back in Willow Creek, the quiet mornings fixing fences, the simple joys of solitude, and realized how much he missed those moments. Yet, despite the ache of homesickness, he couldn't deny the excitement bubbling inside him. Every day brought something new, something extraordinary. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. As they continued exploring the city, Daniel began to notice subtle changes among the Valens. At first, many had regarded him with skepticism, their forms rigid and unyielding as they observed him from afar. But now, some approached him openly, curious about his presence. They asked questions about Earth, about its landscapes, its people, its customs, and listened intently as Daniel shared stories of his hometown. He spoke of snow-covered winters, golden sunsets over open fields, and the warmth of community gatherings. To his surprise, they seemed genuinely fascinated. One afternoon, while walking through a marketplace filled with stalls displaying strange fruits and artifacts, Daniel met a young Valen named Sira. Her form was smaller and more delicate than most, with smooth, opalescent skin that shifted colors whenever she moved. She greeted him warmly, her large eyes sparkling with curiosity. "You are the human Lyra chose?" Sira asked, her voice melodic and eager. "What is it like to live on Earth?" Daniel hesitated, unsure where to begin. "It's different," he said finally. "Not as advanced as this place. But it has its own kind of beauty. The sky is blue, the grass is green, and everything feels alive." Sira tilted her head, clearly intrigued. "Alive? How so?" "Well," Daniel explained, "on Earth, things grow naturally. You plant a seed, and it becomes a tree. You don't need energy fields or technology, it just happens." Sira's expression softened, almost wistful. "That sounds wonderful," she murmured. "Perhaps one day I will visit your world." Daniel smiled faintly, but couldn't shake the sadness that crept into his chest. He doubted Sira would find much beauty in the real Earth, not compared to the perfection of Vela Prime. Still, her enthusiasm reminded him of why he was here, to bridge the gap between two vastly different worlds. Despite the growing acceptance, not everyone was pleased with Daniel's presence. Kale, the skeptical leader who had questioned Lyra's decision, remained a constant source of tension. Whenever Daniel crossed paths with him, Kale's form stiffened, his movements sharp and deliberate. His eyes bore into Daniel with an intensity that made him feel exposed, as if Kale could see straight through him. One evening, during a gathering in the learning halls, Kale confronted Lyra publicly. The hall was filled with Valens, discussing recent discoveries and sharing ideas, their forms shifting in harmony as they conversed. When Kale stepped forward, the room fell silent, all attention turning to him. "Lyra," Kale began, his voice carrying a note of authority, "your choice grows more questionable with each passing day. This human, this primitive being has shown little evidence of value beyond basic survival instincts. Why do you persist in defending him?" Lyra stood tall, her shimmering form unwavering. "Daniel possesses qualities we have yet to fully understand," she replied calmly. "His actions during the tests proved his potential. Is it not our duty to seek knowledge even in unexpected places?" Kale's form shifted slightly, his limbs elongating, as if to emphasize his frustration. "Knowledge, yes, but at what cost? Associating with humans risks contaminating our culture, diluting the purity of our purpose." The room erupted into murmurs, some agreeing with Kale while others defended Lyra. Daniel felt a wave of heat rise to his face, embarrassment and anger mingling within him. He wanted to speak up, to defend himself, but he knew his words would carry little weight among these beings. Instead, He clenched his fists, forcing himself to remain silent. Lyra turned to address the crowd, her voice steady and commanding. "Change is inevitable," she said. "To fear it is to deny growth. Daniel represents an opportunity, a chance to expand our understanding of the universe and ourselves. Will we turn away from that, or will we embrace it?" Her words resonated deeply, sparking a shift in the atmosphere. Several Valens nodded in agreement, their forms relaxing as they absorbed her message. Even Kale seemed momentarily taken aback, though his expression quickly hardened once more. "We shall see," Kale said curtly before turning and walking away, his followers trailing behind him. After the gathering, Lyra sought Daniel out, finding him standing alone near the edge of the hall. His shoulders were slumped, his gaze fixed on the glowing panels lining the walls. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. "I don't belong here," Daniel muttered, shaking his head. "There at time just a guy from Montana. I don't know anything about your world or your people." "That is not true," Lyra replied firmly. "You bring a perspective we lack. Your simplicity, your humanity, it challenges us to rethink what we believe is possible. Daniel, you are stronger than you realize." Her words offered some comfort, but Daniel couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. As he looked around at the shimmering forms of the Valens, their bodies adapting seamlessly to their environment, he felt more alien than ever. Yet deep down, he knew Lyra was right. Whatever doubts lingered, he couldn't give up. Not when so much rested on his shoulders that night. As Daniel lay on the hovering bed inside the ship, he stared up at the ceiling, lost in thought. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges he couldn't predict. But for the first time, he allowed himself to hope, to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. Part 3. The city of Vela Prime was unlike anything Daniel Harper had ever seen. Every step he took felt like walking through a dream, where reality bent and twisted into something both beautiful and strange. The streets saw what passed for. Streets glowed faintly beneath his feet, pulsing with light that seemed alive. Buildings rose around him, their surfaces shimmering like liquid crystal, shifting colors as if responding to the emotions of those who passed by. Strange vehicles floated silently overhead, moving without wheels or engines. While beings of all shapes and sizes bustled about their daily lives, Lyra walked beside him, her presence a steady anchor in the overwhelming chaos. She guided him through the bustling crowds, occasionally pausing to exchange words with other Valens. Though Daniel couldn't understand their language, he noticed how their forms changed subtly during conversations, elongating, skin patterns shifting as if their bodies mirrored their thoughts. It was mesmerizing, but also unsettling, a reminder that he was completely out of his depth. "Where are we going?" Daniel finally asked, breaking the silence between them. His voice sounded small against the hum of activity around them. "The learning halls," Lyra replied, glancing at him briefly before turning her attention back to the path ahead. "It is a place where knowledge is shared. You will begin your tests there." "Tests?" Daniel echoed, his stomach tightening. He didn't like the sound of that. "What kind of tests?" Lyra slowed her pace slightly, giving him a reassuring look. "They are not meant to harm you. They are designed to measure your abilities, your intelligence, creativity, and emotional strength. My people wish to understand why I chose you." Daniel frowned, frustration bubbling up inside him. "I still don't get it. Why me? What makes me so special? I'm just a regular guy from Montana." "You may see yourself as ordinary," Lyra said softly, "but there is more to you than meets the eye. Trust me, Daniel. You will discover it soon enough." Before Daniel could argue further, they arrived at their destination. The learning halls were unlike any building Daniel had encountered so far. Its walls stretched high into the sky, covered in intricate patterns that shifted and rearranged themselves constantly. As they approached, the entrance, a massive archway filled with swirling light, opened automatically, inviting them inside. The interior was even more breathtaking. The ceiling soared above them, dotted with floating orbs of light that cast a gentle glow over everything. In the center of the hall stood a series of platforms, each surrounded by glowing panels displaying images and symbols Daniel couldn't decipher. Several Valens were already present, watching silently as Lyra led Daniel to one of the platforms. "This is where you will begin," Lyra explained. "Each test will challenge you in different ways. Do not worry about failure. Simply do your best." Daniel nodded reluctantly, though his nerves were on edge. He stepped onto the platform, feeling the surface adjust slightly under his weight. One of the Valens approached, their form shifting until they resembled something closer to human, though still undeniably alien. They spoke in a melodic tone, addressing Daniel directly. "The first test measures problem-solving," the Valen said, their voice echoing slightly. "Observe." A holographic image appeared before Daniel, projecting a complex puzzle into the air. It consisted of interlocking shapes that rotated slowly, glowing faintly. The goal was unclear at first, but as Daniel studied it, he realized he needed to align the pieces in a specific pattern to complete the structure. At first glance, it seemed impossible. The shapes moved too quickly, their positions changing every few seconds. Daniel clenched his fists, trying to focus. He wasn't particularly good at puzzles, but he refused to give up not with so many eyes on him. Taking a deep breath, he reached out tentatively, touching one of the shapes. To his surprise, it responded to his touch, locking into place when he positioned it correctly, encouraged. Daniel continued working, his movements becoming faster and more confident as he found a rhythm. The puzzle grew increasingly difficult, requiring him to think several steps ahead, but somehow he managed to keep up. When the final piece clicked into place, the platform emitted a soft chime, signaling success. The Valens exchanged murmurs among themselves, some nodding approvingly. Lyra smiled faintly, her expression unreadable. "Well done," she said quietly, but the tests weren't over. The next challenge tested creativity. Daniel was presented with a blank canvas, a hovering screen that responded to his touch and instructed to create something meaningful. At first he hesitated, unsure where to start. He wasn't an artist, and the pressure of performing for an audience made his hands tremble. But then he thought about home, the rolling hills of Montana. The quiet nights spent stargazing, the simple joys of fixing things with his own two hands. Slowly, he began to sketch, letting his memories guide him. When he finished, the image depicted a serene landscape, a wide-open field under a starry sky, with a lone tree standing tall in the foreground. It wasn't perfect, but it carried a sense of peace and longing that resonated deeply with him. The Valens studied it intently, their expressions thoughtful. Even Kale, who had been observing from a distance, seemed intrigued. The final test was the most challenging. It measured emotional resilience, forcing Daniel to confront simulated scenarios designed to evoke fear, anger, and sadness. In one scenario, he found himself back on Earth, standing in front of his childhood home as flames consumed it. In another, he faced accusations from strangers, their voices harsh and unforgiving. Each scene pushed him to his limits, testing his ability to remain calm and composed. Though the experiences were painful, Daniel drew strength from the lessons life had taught him. He reminded himself that fear was temporary, that anger could be channeled into determination, and that sadness often led to growth. By the time the simulation ended, he was exhausted but proud of how he had handled it. As the tests concluded, the Valens gathered around Daniel, their forms shifting in subtle ways that suggested approval. Kale stepped forward, their expression softer than before. "You have shown promise," they admitted grudgingly. Perhaps Lyra's choice was not entirely misguided. Daniel let out a shaky laugh, relief washing over him. "Does this mean I passed?" "In a way," Lyra replied, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. "But the true test lies ahead. Your journey is only beginning." Oh, Daniel didn't fully understand what she meant. He felt a spark of hope ignite within him. Adored. For the first time since arriving on Vela Prime, he began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he belonged here. Part 2. The moment Daniel Harper took Lyra's hand, the ship around him came alive. The walls shimmered faintly, shifting colors like sunlight dancing on water. Soft lights pulsed rhythmically, casting a warm glow throughout the chamber. For a brief second, Daniel forgot his fear and marveled at the beauty of it all. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen, so advanced, so alien, yet strangely inviting. Lyra led him to a circular platform in the center of the room. She gestured for him to step onto it, her movements calm and deliberate. Daniel hesitated, his heart pounding. "What is this?" he asked nervously, glancing down at the smooth surface beneath his feet. "It will take us where we need to go," Lyra replied simply. Her voice was soothing, almost hypnotic. Before Daniel could ask another question, the platform began to hum softly. A wave of energy surged through him, lifting him slightly off the ground. He gasped, grabbing instinctively for something to hold on to, but there was nothing. The sensation wasn't painful. It was more like floating, but it left him disoriented. "Relax," Lyra said gently, standing beside him as if she didn't feel the strange pull of gravity at all. "You are safe." Daniel tried to steady his breathing, focusing on Lyra's calm demeanor. Slowly, the spinning sensation faded, and the platform settled back into place. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a new room, a vast chamber, filled with glowing panels and intricate designs etched into the walls. In the distance, a massive window revealed the endless expanse of space, dotted with stars that twinkled like diamonds against the blackness. This is incredible," Daniel whispered, stepping closer to the window. He had always loved looking up at the night sky from his backyard in Montana, wondering what lay beyond Earth's atmosphere. But seeing it up close, without any barrier, between him and the universe, was overwhelming. It made him feel small, insignificant, yet somehow connected to something much larger than himself. Lyra watched him silently, her luminous eyes studying his reactions. "Do you understand now?" she asked after a moment. "Understand what?" Daniel turned to face her, his brow furrowed. "Why did you bring me here? What does chosen even mean?" Lyra hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "It is difficult to explain," she admitted. "My people, the Valens, are explorers. We seek knowledge, connection, and understanding across the stars. You, Daniel, possess qualities that intrigue us." "What qualities?" Daniel demanded, frustration creeping into his voice. "I'm just a regular guy fixing trucks in the middle of nowhere. I don't have anything special about me." "That is where you are wrong," Lyra said firmly. She stepped closer, her presence commanding attention. "There is more to you than you realize. Your curiosity, your resilience, your ability to adapt, these are rare traits among your kind." "My kind?" Daniel repeated, crossing his arms defensively. "You mean humans? Are you saying we're not good enough or something?" "No," Lyra replied quickly, shaking her head. "Humans are remarkable. They have achieved much despite their limitations. But they are also unpredictable, prone to conflict and destruction. Many of my people see them as primitive, unworthy of our attention." Yet she paused, her gaze softening. "Yet there is something unique about you." Daniel stared at her, unsure how to respond. Part of him wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, an alien telling him he was special. But another part couldn't ignore the sincerity in her voice. "What happens now?" he asked finally. "Am I supposed to stay here forever? Am I some kind of experiment?" "You are not an experiment," Lyra assured him. "We do not harm those we study. And yes, you will remain with us for now. There is much for you to learn, and much for us to discover." Before Daniel could press further, the ship shuddered slightly, pulling his attention away from Lyra. Outside the window, the stars seemed to stretch and blur, as if they were moving faster than light itself. The sight was breathtaking, but it also filled him with unease. Where were they going? How long would it take to get there? Would he ever see Earth again? As if sensing his thoughts, Lyra placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "We are traveling to Vela Prime, our homeworld," she explained. "It will take several of your Earth hours to arrive. Until then, rest. You have endured much already." Daniel nodded reluctantly. As curious as he was about everything happening around him, exhaustion was starting to set in. The adrenaline that had kept him going earlier was fading, leaving him drained. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into the unknown. Trusting someone or something he barely understood, Lyra guided him to a smaller chamber nearby. where a bed-like structure hovered above the floor. It looked nothing like the beds Daniel was used to, but when he lay down, it conformed perfectly to his body, cradling him in warmth. Despite his racing thoughts, sleep came quickly, pulling him into a deep, dreamless slumber. When Daniel woke up, the ship was quiet. At first he thought he might have imagined everything, the alien woman, the spacecraft, the journey through space, but one glance out the window confirmed it was all real. The view outside had changed dramatically. Instead of infinite stars, a planet loomed large before him, its surface covered in shimmering oceans and sprawling cities that glowed faintly under twin suns. Vela Prime, Lyra said, appearing beside him. She must have sensed he was awake. Our destination. Daniel climbed to his feet, his eyes wide with wonder. This is your home? Yes, Lyra replied, pride evident in her voice. Come, it is time for you to meet my people. She led him to a sleek doorway that slid open at their approach. Beyond it lay a ramp descending toward the planet's surface. As they stepped outside, Daniel felt a rush of cool air against his skin. The sky above was a brilliant shade of lavender, streaked with golden clouds. Strange plants swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves glowing faintly as if lit from within. Everything about this place felt otherworldly, yet strangely peaceful. A group of Valens awaited them near the landing site. Like Lyra, they had shimmering skin and large, expressive eyes, but each one seemed slightly different. Some had elongated limbs, while others appeared shorter and stockier. Their forms shifted subtly as they moved, adapting to their surroundings. In ways Daniel couldn't fully comprehend, they can change shape. Daniel whispered to Lyra, unable to tear his gaze away. In a way, Lyra explained, Our bodies are designed to adapt to various environments. It is one of the reasons we are such effective explorers. One of the Valens stepped forward, a tall figure with silvery hair cascading down their back. They regarded Daniel with obvious curiosity, their head tilting slightly as they studied him. This is Kale, Lyra introduced, a leader among our people. Kale nodded curtly there. Expression unreadable. So, this is the human you brought with you, they said, their voice carrying a hint of skepticism. Explain yourself, Lyra. Why have you chosen him? Lyra straightened, meeting Kale's gaze without hesitation. He possesses qualities. We value qualities that may help us better understand humanity and ourselves. Kale's eyes narrowed. And what makes you believe he is worthy of such trust? Humans are volatile, unpredictable. They have waged wars, destroyed ecosystems, and shown little regard for the greater good. I am aware of their flaws, Lyra replied calmly. But they are also capable of great kindness, creativity, and resilience. Daniel embodies these traits. Kale turned their attention back to Daniel, scrutinizing him closely. Prove it, they challenged. Daniel swallowed hard, suddenly feeling self-conscious. All eyes were on him, and he had no idea what was expected. I don't know what to say, he admitted. I didn't ask for this. I was just minding my own business when Lyra showed up and brought me here, murmurs rippled through the crowd of Valens. Some seemed intrigued by his honesty, while others exchanged doubtful glances. Kale crossed their arms, clearly unimpressed. Perhaps you should reconsider your decision, Lyra. This human appears as ordinary as the rest of his kind. Lyra's expression hardened. Appearances can be deceiving, she countered. Give him a chance. Allow him to prove himself. Ale hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Very well. Know this, if he fails, the consequences will fall upon you. With that, Kale turned and walked away, followed by several others. The remaining Valens dispersed, leaving Daniel alone with Lyra once more. He let out a shaky breath, running a hand through his hair. Oh, that went well, he muttered sarcastically. Lyra placed a reassuring hand on his arm. Do not worry. She said you will have opportunities to show them who you truly are. Trust in yourself, Daniel. That is all you need. Though her words were meant to comfort him, Daniel couldn't shake the weight of expectation settling over him. These aliens, these explorers of the stars, believed he was special, even if he didn't feel it himself. And now, whether he liked it or not, He was caught in the middle of something far bigger than he could have imagined, as Lyra led him toward the glowing cityscape in the distance. Daniel couldn't help but wonder what exactly had he gotten himself into. Part 1. The sun was setting over the rolling hills of Montana, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air smelled of fresh grass and the faint tints of oil from a nearby truck that sat idling by the side of an empty road. Daniel Harper wiped his hands on a greasy rag, his fingers stained black from hours spent trying to fix the stubborn engine. He wasn't a mechanic by trade. He worked as a handyman for the small town of Willow Creek, but he knew enough to get by. And today, with no one else around for miles, he had no choice but to figure things out himself. The road stretched endlessly in both directions. Flanked by tall trees and open fields, it wasn't often someone passed through this part of the state. Most travelers stuck to the highways, avoiding the winding back roads that led nowhere important. That suited Daniel just fine. He liked the quiet, the way the world seemed to pause. Here, far away from the noise and chaos of bigger cities, life moved slower in Willow Creek, and Daniel wouldn't have had it any other way. As he leaned under the hood of the old pickup truck, fiddling with a loose wire, a strange feeling prickled at the back of his neck. At first he thought it was just the cool evening breeze brushing against his skin. But then he noticed something add a faint hum in the air, like electricity buzzing softly. He straightened up, squinting into the distance. The horizon looked normal enough, except there was a flicker of light near the tree line. It wasn't steady like a flashlight or headlights. It pulsed rhythmically, almost alive. Daniel frowned. "What the heck is that?" he muttered to himself. He tossed the rag onto the seat of the truck and took a few steps forward, peering into the darkening woods. His boots crunched against the gravel as he moved closer, curiosity outweighing caution. The light grew brighter, pulsating faster now, until it suddenly erupted into a blinding flash that engulfed everything around him. For a moment, Daniel couldn't see anything. The world dissolved into pure white, and a deafening roar filled his ears. Panic surged through him as he stumbled backward, shielding his face with his arms. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Just when he thought he might pass out, the light dimmed, leaving behind an eerie silence. When Daniel finally lowered his arm, blinking rapidly to clear his vision, he froze. Standing before him was someone, a woman, though not quite human. Her skin shimmered like liquid metal, catching the last rays of sunlight in ways that made her seem almost unreal. Her eyes were large and luminous, glowing faintly with a soft blue hue. She wore a sleek suit that clung to her body, its surface shifting subtly, as if it were made of living material. She didn't move, just stood there watching him with an expression that was impossible to read. Daniel's mouth went dry. He wanted to say anything, but the words caught in his throat. All he could do was stare, his mind racing to make sense of what he was seeing. Who are you?" He finally managed to choke out, his voice trembling. The woman tilted her head slightly, studying him as if she were examining a puzzle. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. Her voice was low and melodic, carrying an accent that sounded foreign, yet strangely familiar. "I am Lyra," she said simply. Each word was deliberate, carefully pronounced. "I have come for you, for me." Daniel echoed, his confusion deepening. "Why? What do you want?" Lyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer, her movements graceful and fluid. Despite her alien appearance, there was something oddly calming about her presence. It was as if she radiated a quiet confidence that put others at ease in someone like Daniel, who had every reason to be terrified. "You were chosen," she said finally, her tone matter of fact. "Chosen," Daniel repeated, shaking his head. "Chosen for what?" "I don't understand." "The reason will come later," Lyra replied cryptically. She reached out a hand toward him, palm facing upward. The gesture was inviting, but also commanding. Daniel hesitated, torn between fear and fascination. Something about her, the way she carried herself, the intensity of her gaze made it impossible to look away. Before he could respond, a strange sensation washed over him. It started as a tingling in his fingertips, spreading quickly through his entire body until it felt like every nerve was on fire. He tried to take a step back, but his legs refused to obey. The ground beneath him seemed to dissolve, replaced by a swirling vortex of colors and lights. For a brief second, he caught a glimpse of the forest fading away, replaced by stars streaking past like ribbons of light. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the sensation stopped. Daniel found himself standing inside a vast, metallic chamber, surrounded by smooth walls that curved upward into a domed ceiling. The air smelled clean and sterile, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. In the center of the room stood Lyra, her shimmering form unchanged. "What? Where am I?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked around wildly, searching for some sign of familiarity, but everything was alien. Even the gravity felt different, lighter somehow. "This is my ship," Lyra explained. "We are traveling through space." "Space," Daniel repeated, his knees threatening to buckle beneath him. He sank down onto the floor, which was surprisingly warm despite its metallic appearance. "You're kidding, right? This has to be some kind of dream." "It is no dream," Lyra said firmly. She knelt beside him, her glowing eyes locking onto his. "You must trust me, Daniel. I mean you no harm." "How do you know my name?" he demanded, his voice rising slightly. "How do you even know?" "I exist. I'm nobody." Lyra smiled faintly, though the expression looked strange on her alien features. "You are more than you realize," she said. "That is why you were chosen." Daniel opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. His mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened. Less than an hour ago, he'd been fixing a broken-down truck on a deserted road. Now he was aboard an alien spacecraft, talking to a being who claimed to have chosen him for reasons he couldn't begin to comprehend. It all felt surreal, like something out of a movie. Yet, deep down, Daniel knew it was real. The weight of Lyra's presence, the hum of the ship around him, it was undeniable. Whatever this was, it wasn't a dream or a hallucination. Somehow, impossibly, he had been plucked from his ordinary life and thrust into the unknown. As Lyra rose to her feet offering him a hand, Daniel hesitated. Every instinct told him to run, to resist. But something about Hertha, calm certainty in her voice, the kindness in her gaze made him pause. Slowly, reluctantly, he reached out and took her hand. In that moment, Daniel realized his life would never be the same again.